I'm Chris Barrow with the BBC News. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is cutting short a visit to the United States in the wake of a deadly rocket attack on the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. 12 people aged between 10 and 20 were killed in the Druze Arab area of Majd al-Shams when a football pitch was hit. Mr. Netanyahu warns the Lebanese group Hezbollah that it would pay a heavy price. Hezbollah has denied any involvement. Paul Adams is in Jerusalem.
This is precisely what people have been worried about, have been fearing for the past 10 months. That this simmering conflict along Israel's northern border with Lebanon would result in a mass fatality event which would trigger a much bigger conflict. I think it is inevitable that Israel will reply. To think back to the attack by a Yemeni Houthi drone on Tel Aviv a week or so ago, which killed one civilian. Israel's response to that attack was pretty quick and pretty severe. So I think we can expect something of the same.
Donald Trump has told a Bitcoin conference that he would champion cryptocurrency if he wins the US presidential election in November. He also addressed a campaign in Minnesota where he ramped up criticism of his Democratic rival Kamala Harris.
She was a bum 3 weeks ago. She was a bum. A failed vice president in a failed administration with millions of people crossing, and she was the border czar.
Kamala Harris, who's in Massachusetts, appeared bemused over some of Mr. Trump's comments.
We have to fight ahead. We've got to fight ahead. And we are the underdogs in this race. Okay? Understand? We're the underdogs in this race. And you may have noticed Donald Trump has been resorting to some lies about unwritten, and some of what he is running me are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
The Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, has defended the decision not to allow several former Latin American leaders into the country to observe Venezuela's presidential election later today. He said they were unacceptable far-right politicians. Our correspondent Ione Wells says there's a feeling of optimism among voters of Mr. Maduro's rival.
There is one thing that a lot of people here have been saying, and people have been speaking to even before arriving here, which is that something this time feels different. And by that I think they mean that for the first time in years, the opposition has been very, very organised. They united behind a single candidate, Maria Machado, who is banned from standing by the government as the presidential candidate, but has really rallied behind her replacement, Edmundo Gonzalez, who has had huge amounts of momentum behind him. They've managed to sort of whip up massive rallies on their campaign trail around the country.
This is the World News from the BBC. South Korea's military is investigating a leak of the personal information of agents assigned to an intelligence unit tasked with spying on North Korea. The Korea Defense Intelligence Command, a secretive branch of the South Korean military, discovered the leak about a month ago. Concerned at their identities being exposed, some agents are reportedly returning home. A civilian official at the Military Intelligence Command is under investigation after classified information was discovered on his personal laptop. Tuareg rebels in northern Mali say they've inflicted heavy losses on government forces and allied Russian mercenaries. He said dozens have been killed, wounded or captured during 2 days of clashes close to the Algerian border. Here's Grant Ferris.
Northern Mali, especially its border areas, has been lawless for many years, but the latest fighting appears to have been particularly fierce. A spokesman for an alliance which wants a separate Tuareg homeland accused government troops and mercenaries from Russia's Wagner group of terrorizing civilians in the Tinzaouatin area. In response, he said Tuareg fighters had begun to drag out their enemies. They have said had suffered enormous losses. Mali's military said earlier that 2 soldiers had died in the fighting, along with many more rebels.
The largest wildfire in California this year is still out of control, despite the efforts of 2,500 firefighters and several helicopters. The Park Fire, which started near the city of Chico, is a suspected arson attack on Wednesday, has been growing by about 20 square kilometres an hour. At the Olympic Games in Paris, Australia are leading the medals table after the first full day of competition. They've dominated the swimming events, winning gold in the women's 100 metres freestyle relay. Later on Sunday, another 13 gold medals are due to be awarded in sports including archery, mountain biking and skateboarding. That's the latest BBC News. Hello, this is Alex Robson with the newsroom. It's the deadliest strike in the current round of skirmishes with Hezbollah along Israel's northern border. At least 12 teenagers and young adults were killed on Saturday when a rocket attack hit a football pitch in a remote town in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Many more were injured. Hezbollah has denied it carried out the strike. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been visiting the United States, said there would be a heavy price to pay.
Since I was updated about the disaster, we've been holding continuous security consultations, and I've directed that our return to Israel be brought forward. As soon as I arrive, I will immediately convene the Security Cabinet. I can say that the State of Israel will not let this pass in silence. We will not overlook this.
Earlier, an Israeli airstrike on a school in central Gaza where displaced people were sheltering killed at least 30 Palestinians, according to the Israel Health Ministry. Israel said it was targeting a Hamas command center. Our correspondent Barbara Fatt-Usher is in Jerusalem. She told us more about what happened in the Golan Heights.
We know that Hezbollah has categorically denied it's behind the strike on Shams, which is in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, but it did claim at least 4 attacks earlier in the evening before the scale of the Shams strike became clear. It was responding to Israeli attacks in Lebanon, which had killed 4 militants. And the Israelis say they are convinced it was Hezbollah. They have released a statement as with a graphic saying that they have located from where the strike was launched and that it is just north of Shams in Lebanon and right in the direct line of fire to this village. But Hezbollah had earlier also said that it was targeting an Israeli base, and that particular base is in between the village and the launch site. Hezbollah has continued to very strongly deny it.
And this is only going to add to long-standing fears of regional escalation.
Yes, there has been conflict on the northern border of Israel since October when Hamas carried out those attacks in southern Israel, and then Israel started the war in Gaza. And Hezbollah had joined early on, saying that it was acting in solidarity with Hamas. But these attacks back and forth have been contained, essentially. They've been pretty regular. There have been increases and escalations from time to time, but they have managed to avoid a wider war. There has been a great deal of concern, especially from Israel's allies, that this was a miscalculation that would trigger an all-out war, and there is concern that this might be it. You've had some very strong statements from the Israelis saying that they would respond. You've also had a rare statement from the Lebanese government, which usually stays out of this, condemning the attack on civilians, saying this violates international law and urging a de-escalation in the situation. So there is a great deal of concern that things will get worse and that they might build into a wider conflict.
Well, what's the significance of this area, the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights?